Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be creating a card using a couple stamp sets from Altenew. The first stamp set I'm starting with is Peony Bouquet, and I'm going to be stamping some of the stamps from this stamp set and then watercoloring them using the no-line watercoloring technique. So first I'm going to go ahead and prep my watercolor paper. I'm using some Arches cold press watercolor paper today, and I've taped that down to a board to help the paper stay completely flat while I'm painting. The watercolors I'm using today are from Magello. These are the Mission Gold watercolors that I've used in the past, and they are absolutely fantastic. I'm so happy to see that so many of you were able to pick these up for that great price over at Amazon. I'll have links to this watercolor set down below in the video description and over at my blog as well. Usually they have these for a really good price, around $70. So it's actually quite a bit off from that retail price. So if you are looking for some good watercolors, you might try these out and purchase them at Amazon. So I'm testing out some different colors from the watercolor palette. I just want to see what kind of shades they had and kind of see how they would look together. Then I narrowed it down to a few different colors that I wanted to use. So before I actually do the stamping of the flowers, I'm going to do kind of an underlayer of color. I've done this in the past and I really like the effect. Sometimes in my mind I can get that like, this is a white piece of paper. It can kind of block me from actually starting. So by just putting down some color, it gives me a little bit more freedom to play with my painting. And I kind of like the look of that layered color effect, like some of the under layers of color glowing through the top layers. And you can really get that with watercolors, especially if you do an under layer of color and then do your regular painting on top, which is what I'm doing today. So I painted all of that, let it dry, or sped it up with my heat tool, and then I made a mask out of one of the large flower stamps. That's because I'm going to do some stamping around the flower, and I want to make sure that the stamp lines don't intersect with the first flower that I stamp. So I'm using some distress ink today. This is the color Antique Linen. It's a great color for doing no-line watercoloring because distress ink in particular is formulated to work with water. So as I start to paint along these shapes on this flower, some of that ink color will sort of look like it disappears. So it's really great for doing no-line coloring. Use that mask to protect the first flower that I stamped, and now I'm stamping the second flower right next to it, and moved that one over so that I can do some leaves around the second flower. So I'm just adding some leaves and some also smaller buds around the flowers, and then I'm going to start painting. So I'm not doing a whole lot of color mixing at this point. I'm using the color straight from the palette. I figured it would be a little bit easier that way. And I'm using each individual section of the flower and only painting the ones that aren't touching. So you'll notice as I start painting that I'm using sections or petals that are apart from each other, and then I'll kind of move around, and as everything dries, then I can come back and paint the areas that are in between those two petals. In order to get sort of like the faded look with this, I put down kind of the full strength of paint down at the very base of the flower. And then I got my paintbrush wet with a little bit of water, dabbed it off on a paper towel, and then came back in and started to spread that paint. And I do that a few different times. Usually it's about 3 times. So about right here is when I'm spreading it out to the far end of that petal. And then I'll go ahead and speed up the painting process for you guys, just so you can see the entire process, but it doesn't have to take so long. So I'm adding more of that pink color in and then spreading it out. You notice I did that about 3 or 4 times to get that color to spread. And I'm trying to do areas that aren't too close to each other. You can see that area right there sort of bled into each other. Not a huge deal. I just had to make sure that I didn't work on petals that were right next to each other anymore. Spreading out that color. And I really love how this color kind of dries back. It's a really intense sort of magenta purple, and then as it dries back it softens just a little bit. I really like that look. So moving on and doing some other areas. I'm going to go ahead and turn on some music so you guys can see the entire painting process. When it comes to doing the leaves, I did the exact same thing that I did with the petals, mostly just trying to do them in small sections and spreading out that color across the entire shape area. So I'll be back after all of the painting is finished. As you can see, I added a light color around the edges and then a darker color right around the center of the flowers and near the bottom. Just wanted to give it a little bit more of a background. So I let that dry and then I took it off the board and peeled off that blue tape that was holding it down. I did end up trimming down this piece just a little bit so that it was an exact size for an A2 card. So it is 5.5 inches wide by 4.25 tall. And then I grabbed this other stamp set called Beautiful Day, and I'm using one of the sentiments from that stamp set. I've stamped that onto some vellum, and then I put some white embossing powder over the top, and then used my heat tool to melt that embossing powder. Then trim down that piece to be a small strip, and it's going to go on the right side of this watercolor piece, kind of overlapping the flowers just a little bit. The reason I used vellum is because I wanted to kind of have it so it doesn't interfere with the entire painting. I wanted it to just have a small message up in the top corner. The card base I'm using today is made out of Nina Solarite cardstock. This is the 110-pound version, and I scored it at 5.5 to create a side-folding landscape card. I then added some Tombow Extreme adhesive to the back of that watercolor piece. Put quite a few strips of that adhesive down so that it'll stick nice and firmly to that card base. And then starting from one of the corners, I just spread that out over the entire surface of the card. So that finishes the card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said before, this is for Altenew, and it's actually part of a blog hop. So if you would like a chance to win some prizes and also see a bunch of other inspiration using Altenew stamps, please head over to my blog. There's a link down in the video description. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.